I have a brother-in-law that works for one of the major financial institutions, and he said, you know what, I'm going to retire with a couple $1 million. And I said, that's phenomenal. Did you Roth any of it over the years? No. I said, well, then you don't have a couple $1 million. He said, yes, I do. It's got my name on it. Look at my statement. I said, you own that with the government. And the government's going to dictate to you how much of that portfolio that you have is theirs by the way of taxes and RMDs and those types of things.
Welcome back to Spicy Takes and Tax Breaks. I'm Aubree Denekamp, also known as the Write-Off Queen. And today we're going to talk about something that might make a few people uncomfortable, especially the financial professionals out there. If your CPA and your wealth advisor agree on absolutely everything, you probably have a problem. Not because something's necessarily wrong, but because real wealth is built in tension. I've saved clients hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes, hundreds of thousands, and I've watched them waste every single dollar of it into their life. It's not reckless necessarily, not malicious, it's just without a plan. They feel relief and good in the moment. They upgrade that house, buy a car, maybe take that bigger distribution. They expand that lifestyle, but they're not building an asset. And that's where the gap is. So tax strategy creates opportunity, but wealth design determines whether you keep it or build it. So today I'm bringing in someone who sits on the other side of the table, Steve Mallory, who's a partner at URA Group, which is a great wealth management firm that we partner with. And today we're talking about what actually happens after tax savings. Steve, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Aubree. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So tell us, what do you do?
Well, I am a Series 65 fiduciary, along with my business partner, John Keeber. We are the principal owners of URA Group AZ here in Scottsdale, and mostly work with retirees or semi-retired individuals that are obviously getting close to the end of their professional life cycles and are concerned about, does Social Security continue, and what do I do with Medicare and all of those things I'm sure that you obviously deal with. But also, how do I take what I've accumulated over my professional lifetime and how do I maintain it and still, live the lifestyle that I want to live for the rest of my days? So.
Yeah. And how do you see people mess that up, or when do people typically arrive to your door?
Well, it's funny. Years ago, I worked for a guy that used to have all these sayings that, would laugh about. But probably the biggest problem, or one of the biggest issues that we do see, is that they show up, hey, I'm retiring next week. What do I do? That does limit you a little bit because there are, opportunities that you do have over your lifetime if you would take advantage of them. But better late than never. But like this gentleman used to tell me, start sooner or run faster. So sometimes you have to run a little faster. But there's all kinds of variables involved with what kind of money is it? And we'll talk a little bit about that, I'm sure, going forward. What you need to live off of, what kind of income streams you have coming in. Do you have, obviously, Social Security? Everyone does. How does Medicare fit in? How do taxes come in? Do you have a pension? Do you have an annuity? All those things play a huge role in the direction that you go and how you manage it. And that's why it's so important for us as advisors to understand who we're dealing with, understand what their goals are and what they want to achieve in their retirement years. And then finally, what, if any, do they want to leave behind? Some people say, hey, look, I want to spend my last penny and I want to bounce my last check on the way out.
Yep.
They all say that, but no one really does. They want to leave money behind. And how do they do that? They want to make sure that they don't go through probate and all those things. So it's just because you retire, actually, that's kind of when things really start, because you want to make sure that you're doing it the right way. So.
Well, and lifestyle takes such a huge factor in this, and I'm sure most people don't even know where to start with that. Like, I work with people on making a budget, whether that's for their business or personal life, but how does that play into what you guys do in actually creating that plan for retirement?
Well, it's huge because it's kind of like, well, it is. It's running a business. So if you have cash flows coming in that you can count on that exceed your expense needs, then you have a wonderful business. If you have cash needs on a monthly basis that you spend a lot of money and you're pulling off your portfolio, that offers some opportunities, because what happens if you're pulling in? We have clients we're sending $30,000, $40,000 a month to every month. It gets a little bit stressful when the market is volatile and you have to pull off those funds out of a portfolio. So, how you diversify that, how we set it up, those types of things. So it's important for us to understand who you are and where you want to go. And while you're getting to there, what kind of lifestyle do you want to lead? So there's so many variables that are involved with it. Do yourselves a favor, find someone that you mesh with, sit down and ask questions and go through the process.
Absolutely. And creating that plan is huge. So say someone is coming to you before retirement and they say, I have 150,000, I saved in taxes this year through my entity, structure planning, all of that. So what should I do with that money? Do I get to go on a trip? Do I invest that somewhere? Do I buy a business? What do you typically recommend in a situation like that?
Well, and again, it kind of comes back to what their needs are. So if this is, straight money that they've accumulated and that they have and they want to do something with, obviously, we look at different things like, do you have the ability to contribute to a Roth IRA? Are you a high earner? If you are, then obviously you might not be able to do that. But, can you do that? Because you want to get, some of those accounts into a tax-free situation. If it's like, hey, I'm a high earner, I have $150,000, I'm getting killed in taxes. What do I do with this? We could put it into an individual or a joint account, and we have funds, for example, and I'd love to share it with you if you want to reach out to me, but we have a fund that is available that you put $150,000 into, and it has anywhere between a 6 and a 7.5% dividend yield. But the nice thing about that is it's a tax-free dividend yield, and this has been consistent over the last few years. So easy math, $100,000, you have a 7% dividend, you're going to get $7,000. It's going to be deposited into your account. At the end of the year, when they talk to you, that $7,000 is tax-free because it's a partnership. So those are some of the things, depending on what the client's looking for, that we have the ability to use. So it really comes down to the uniqueness of the client and what they're looking for, and back to the goals and who are you and where do you want to go.
Well, and it surprises me every year because that's been a big thing I've seen with an influx of your clients on my end is why aren't more advisors using that? It's not something I've seen a ton of outside of that, and it's a brilliant strategy. Is there any drawbacks that you see there, or is it just something that people aren't?
As far as financial, I don't know. They should. Most don't know. Especially if you're going to go to one of the big firms and you call in, you're probably going to get someone that just retired, and they're going to tell you what they're being dictated to by their managers of, hey, look, if someone calls in with $1 million, here's the pie chart you give them. If someone looks for tax advantages, let's go to bonds. That's the old way that Wall Street does it. But there are some unique situations out there, and if you have an advisor that understands some of those things, then you definitely want to take advantage of that. It all like I said, find someone that you mesh with, someone that's got your goals in mind and sits down and takes the time to ask you these questions. And they need to understand what you're trying to accomplish, and working together with someone like yourself who's a tax person so that you can, be efficient with your money. No question about it. But I don't understand why more people don't utilize some of the things that are available. Understanding there's thousands and all kinds of funds. But if you go into a big custodian, chances are they're going to fill you up with funds that have their name on them. Not
Because
that they're bad,
getting kickbacks.
but that they're making a little bit more money if they're using one of their funds.
Yep.
Makes sense. That's why, sometimes they have names of stadiums
Yes.
after them. So
No.
that's not that it's bad. It's just that that's how the game works.
Yeah. And you brought up a good point. So I hear a lot of people who are like, I checked in with my financial advisor 5 years ago. How often is that optimal point of where, hey, you should be doing check-ins? Because it is inundating. Sometimes people don't always want to do it. But what is that sweet spot for you guys that you think you should be meeting with a client?
So we'll kind of walking you through, if we have a new client come aboard, especially that's someone that's just retired, we will, they're going to be nervous. They not necessarily know us per se. We don't have the history yet together. But I would say that, the first couple meetings afterward are every 3 months to 6 months. So we're going to meet 3-4 times a year if they would like. Just, after the second or third meeting, there's not much that's discussed unless there's something major that's happened. But just to give them that peace of mind. And then normally as we go forward with our clients, we're going to meet, twice a year to once a year. And a lot of the times when we reach out, they will say, hey, I'm good. Do you have anything for Steve or John? No, but thanks for reaching out. Call me in 6 months. So, but it's important to communicate, especially if you have changes that have been made. Buy a new house, inheritance. Hey, we need to put a new roof on. What bucket of money do I take that from? Those types of things. You want to communicate. You want to communicate with your advisor and ask them, what do you think? Not necessarily do you have to take the advice, but it's our job to make sure that we educate you on, hey, you might want to think about this or you might want to think about that before you make the decision that's best for you and going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, even I have clients all the time who are like, okay, I've maxed out my IRA, I've maxed out my 401k, but I need more deductions. What do I do? It's something we've done for several of our clients is we put it into, hey, did you have new grandkids this year? Do you have any additional children? Could any of those be paid through your business and then invested into as well? And there's so many different strategies around that. Which will kind of bring us into the next thing is retirement.
Right.
What is, if you could kind of explain when retirement should start? I love hearing the answer to this from pretty much anyone these days. It should be as soon as possible.
Yeah, whatever you want.
Yeah, but also like how should people be saving? Is there a rule of thumb there? Is it different from every single situation?
Yeah, it is. It's interesting when I hear some of those things that you should have X amount of money. You want to have as much as you can. There's no question about that. But the retirement that we see, the ones that financially are the most successful are the ones that have the income streams. So if you're spending $8,000 a month, you have a pension coming in, you have Social Security with your wife, you and your wife, and maybe you have that $8,000 that's covering those normal expenses, and then you have your portfolio in case you want to spend a lot of money traveling the world or what have you, put a new roof on the house, buy a new house, whatever you want to do. But probably one of the biggest issues, well, not issues, it's, you could have too much in one certain bucket. For example, I have a brother-in-law that works for one of the major financial institutions, and he said, you know what, I'm going to retire with a couple $1 million. And I said, that's phenomenal. Good for you, right? He said, yeah, it's great. And I said, well, it's all in the qualified state, so it's all in his 401k. I'm like, did you Roth any of it over the years? No. I said, well, then you don't have a couple $1 million. He said, yes, I do. It's got my name on it. Look at my statement. I said, you own that with the government. And the government's going to dictate to you how much of that portfolio that you have is theirs by the way of taxes and RMDs and those types of things. So it's a good problem to have, but he's probably going to spend a good portion of his retirement trying to be as efficient as he possibly can, because if he passes on that money to his kids, they have rules associated with getting that money out, and he could hit their kids at their highest earning years, and they're going to be in a higher tax bracket. They have 10 years to take it out, or they're going to pay a penalty. So there's all kinds of rules around the financial world that 90% of the general population don't understand, and if they do understand it, they probably understand it wrong. That's where it's so important to have the synergy between your advisor and an accountant. So even, Medicare, all of those things are so important to make sure that you're making the right choice so you don't go back and go, I didn't know that. Ask questions.
Absolutely. And I think that's huge. I think most of us don't know that, even in a financial world in some capacities. I hear things all the time that are misconstrued. So
my friend told me that's probably makes it good.
Yep. And then I Googled it.
My mom saw it on the internet.
Yeah.
So
nope. I hear that more times than not, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So
that phone call.
How do you know what to save then? So say you're making $150,000 a year, let's call it just a W-2 position. Mm-hmm. How much of that should be going into a 401k? Is that something that's just straight line on a percentage? Is that based on other factors?
Well, a ton of other factors. So really, what are you spending? You could have someone making $150,000, have their house paid off. I've seen people that spend $3,000 a month, and I'm looking at them going, what do you stay home all the time? Enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
You want to, and I've seen people that make $150,000 that spend every penny.
Plus.
It kind of depends on, what you're looking for. But on average, you want to make sure, especially as you get closer to those retirement years, you want to make sure that you're maxing out as much or putting in as much money as you possibly can. At the very least, to answer your question, at the very least, if you have a 401k program or a retirement program through a corporation, you want to make sure and put at least enough money in that you're getting the match from the company, because that's free money. There's ways of getting it out if you have issues, those types of things, for problems for the money, but on average, you want to do at least that, and then obviously try to max out. That's the advantage of a corporation retirement program. The contribution limits are higher. There's some opportunities that you have to kind of filter through, and we need to talk about that. But on average, take advantage of the retirement program that you do have through the corporation, and make sure you take advantage of what money that they're matching.
Yeah, and the matching is a huge part of it. People, it's free money that you're getting put into your accounts.
Right.
On the flip side of that, I will see people who are maxing out accounts on their own solo 401ks or making sure they have these huge programs as a business owner, but then they're also having to pull out line of credits to fund that, and
Right.
these huge interest rates and stuff like that. So making sure looking at the whole picture is huge. But let's dive back into kind of what you were talking about. What happens when that money actually hits a 401k account? How is that invested, and is there opportunity to invest elsewhere?
Yeah, so I would say that this is probably the biggest issue that I see, because we're in what we call a self-funded retirement environment. I mean, I have clients come to me all the time asking me, what happens if the stock market corrects? What happens if it crashes? There's always that fear of the unknown. Well, it has, and it will. What is a crash? What's a correction? I mean, in the last 5 years, we've gone through a pandemic where the market dropped about 25-30% over a period of days and weeks. And then a couple of years later, we saw the market drop for basically about a year because of inflation, because we took all the money and dumped a bunch of money into the economy because of COVID, and then things got expensive, and we were all paying $8 for a dozen eggs. Even though you don't like eggs, got to get them. I don't know. So yeah, there's issues with the market, the whole 9 yards. But we, as a country, as the world, the investment markets need to be efficient, and when you look at it historically, they have been. Now, does that mean that you can't see a correction, a crash, what we saw in 07, 08? Yes, it definitely can happen. I hope we learn from our history, but I think many of us can probably remember, and I do, living in Phoenix and Scottsdale area, how important real estate is. And, I remember going in and signing my second, I can pull out $250,000 and I'm going to go buy another house because they're appreciating so much.
Yep.
You saw people owning 5, 6, 7, 8 homes, trying to flip them, make money, and then the bottom drops out. What can happen? What can go wrong when you don't have to provide any papers? You just have to sign on the dotted line and here's your money.
Yep.
So in retrospect, we can look back and say, okay, wow, it makes sense that this happened. But back to the efficiency of the market and the 401ks, I can't tell you how many times people are like, well, I got a 401k. I said, oh, that's great. Do you know what you're invested in? I have a 401k.
Yeah, it's invested in my 401k.
Yeah, what do you mean? So, well, what's your investment? Where's the money going? They're like, I have no idea. I'm like, have you ever changed it? I signed up with this company 30 years ago. It's the same thing I got 30 years ago. Wow. So, what's the market done in the last 30 years? So you want to make sure that you understand how to invest the money. And you need to look at it for what's the investment horizon that you have. Is it, I'm retiring in a year, or do I have 30 years? Because that can make a huge difference. So for example, I met with a client the other day who has a 401k, and he's in a target fund, which have been wonderful. They've become very prevalent, actually because of 07, 08, which is basically as you get closer to that target date, you have more bond positions, you have equity positions, and it's supposed to be more conservative, right? Well, unfortunately, in the last 5 years, bonds have actually lost value because they work inversely with interest rates. And when interest rates went through the roof, we saw bond values drop dramatically. So in the last 5 years, I looked at the return of this guy's 2030 target fund, and we're still 4 years away, I guess. And the return over the last 5 years was 13%. 13%, which isn't terrible. I mean,
It's not great.
no. Conversely, you look at the IVV, which is an S&P fund, an index fund, an ETF. If you look at the QQQ's up almost 100%. IVV's up 80%. Boy, if you're 30 years old or you're 40 years old, you should be in funds that are going to produce a little bit more. And even if they do drop, which QQQ dropped 30% in 2022, but as a younger person, you're buying it as it gets cheaper. It's kind of like going to Nordstrom's and buying clothes on sale.
Yep.
So I could argue that, for someone young, that's a better position. My point being is that depending on your time horizon, how old you are, what you're trying to accomplish, boy, there's all kinds of opportunities in a 401k. They have a program right now that is a newer program called PCRA. It's a personal choice retirement account, which actually is a sub-account that you can add on or you can hook on with your 401k for just about any custodian that you have that allows you to take money out of your existing 401k, put it in the sub-account, and have access to some of these investment options that you don't through your existing 401k. So if you had the ability to say, hey, look, I want to put money in the IVV and QQQ because I'm 40 years old and I'm not going to be using this for 20 years, can you imagine what that difference would be versus a target fund of 2060, which I looked at that, and the return on that is better, but not a ton better, way under what this is. So there are opportunities out there that you just have to ask.
And so who does someone ask in that situation? Because a lot of people don't even, I mean, they have a 401k, and when they even leave the job, I sometimes get directed that question of like, how do I get access to my 401k? Do I go through payroll accounts? So who does someone reach out to? Is it dependent on where they're working or who's providing the 401k?
That's where you reach out to an advisor or a tax professional and say, hey, this is what I have. That's another thing. People leave jobs and they leave their 401ks in there. They're not invested very well. I've seen 401ks invested in money markets. I'm like, well, why would you do that? You want to make sure that you understand what your options are. A lot of people think if I leave a corporation, I should just roll my 401k into another 401k. Here's the advantages back to what we talked about with 401ks. 401ks advantages, the contribution limits are higher and the matching. Those bar none are phenomenal. The downside to 401ks is that you have limited investment options. And you are responsible for making sure that you're in whatever investment option that's available through the corporation or through the program, that you're in the right one, which most people have no idea what that is. So that's where, it's good to have a relationship with someone that can explain that. And again, back to what's your investment horizon? What are you trying to accomplish? If this is money that, hey, I'm 40 years old and I still have 20 years or 25 years to work, then you should be more aggressive.
Yeah.
If you're 64 and you're retiring next year, that's where you probably need to pull back and say, look, I've accumulated this. Now I need to protect it, depending on the market condition and what's going on in the economy at that time. So bar none, I mean, there's so many variables that are associated with all this. There's not a round peg that fits in the round hole with anything. What return should I get? And what you want to get as much as you can. You want to put as much money away as you can. And then as you get into retirement and close to it, you really want to think about how do I get my money in the most efficient situation as possible so that I don't get nailed with taxes and I don't have to pay over my share of this $38 trillion debt that we have as a country. What could go wrong there? But the number one thing is that people, for the most part, 90+% are invested the wrong way or have no idea how they're invested in their retirement programs. And that's one of the things that this PCRA can help, because you can hire someone like myself and say, you do it. So I don't have to be in a target fund because I don't know what else to do.
Yeah, and I don't know what the funds are most of the time even. Right. So can you do that with just a traditional 401k program, or can you do that with a solo 401k as well, the PCRA?
Well, the nice thing about the solo 401k is that it can go through a company like like John and I's, a URA group. We can set you up with a solo 401k. So we can get you access to, all of the investment vehicles that are out there. You're not going to be limited with that. With the difficulty is when you work for a corporation and it's, let's say you have Vanguard or you have Fidelity or you have, whoever, Empower is running your 401k. Many of them now, Fidelity has their own. Many of them will interface with Schwab, who is our custodian, that allows the ability to open a PCRA. It's a sub account. And then you go in online and you open that up and then you say, look, I have $1 million in my 401k. I want to move over 900 of it and I want to have a professional advisor manage this because I want access to these investment options that I don't have through my 401k. And you're going to see over time, especially, I mean, we talked about one target fund, but over time, you're going to see a substantial increase on your return that you're getting versus what you have with some of the plays that you have in a 401k. Not that all of them are bad, they're fine, but they're not as good as some other. And the market changes all the time.
Yeah.
And if you're not adjusting to what the market condition is, you might be missing out. So there are all kinds of those options that just people don't know about.
Yeah.
And that's the unfortunate part. And we're trying, like situations like this, we're trying to get that word out through podcasts and that type of information.
Yeah, which I think is great. And so with that, then investing, pulling your money out, staying strong. I know we're going to kind of switch gears here, not so much in the 401k retirement sense, but I see some people who check on their accounts every single day. And the second things start to get volatile at all, they start to pull out and they miss so many opportunities and they end up losing a lot of money doing that. When is the right time to pull out for those who are watching all their accounts themselves? Is there a right time? How long do you stay in? Is it just not recommended?
You know, not to be facetious on this, but I kind of joke about this with people. And, if anyone really knew that answer, first of all, as human beings, we wouldn't be able to keep it to ourselves. We'd be bragging about it. But if I had that answer, I probably would be, in a pair of board shorts right now, sitting on a beach in my Miami or my Maui.
Pina colada in hand.
My Maui, huge home and mansion. But no, there's an old saying in this industry that time in the market beats trying to time the market 100% of the time. So no one knows. I mean, today is a wonderful example of how the market is so unpredictable and it's counterintuitive. So NVIDIA, which is the biggest holding right now, biggest company, most valuable company in the world right now, reports earnings yesterday, and they beat street estimations. And the markets, or the stock is dropping, last I saw, 3, 4, 5%. So you're trying to understand, there's a lot of variables behind why those types of things happen. But the important thing is to make sure that you get into the market and that you're not too risky, you diversify, and it really comes back to your investment horizon, what you're trying to accomplish, taxes, all of those things. For example, let's say, we have clients that we have Roth accounts with. Well, chances are they're never going to touch those Roth accounts. So I tell them, this really is not money earmarked for you and your husband or you and your wife. This is money that you really have earmarked for the kids, and we should invest it with that type of mentality. Longer term, probably less conservative, but ability to grow it over a period of time. Maybe the NVIDIA, maybe Amazon, maybe Apple, those companies that can be volatile during market instability, but can also take off and run when the market's good. And when you look at a 20 to 30 year time horizon with a Roth account, tax-free, you should be in something that has that ability to grow instead of maybe just bond positions or a target fund that is only going to give you a 2 or 3% return on a good year.
Yeah.
So that's so important to have that kind of synergy with your investment advisor to say, hey, look, okay, I get that. This is what we're going to live off. Maybe it's the qualified funds, the IRAs, the 401ks, but I want to grow this Roth bucket for my kids or my grandkids. And also you asked about, hey, if somebody has $150,000 that's sitting in the bank, that's the other major thing that we see. I have $1 million sitting in my bank account. Why? Well, for an emergency. Like, what's the biggest emergency you've ever had? 10, 15,000. But that money's sitting there, the bank's loaning it out, getting 6, 7, 8%, and they're making less than 0.25%. So efficiency-wise, not too smart, but also growing that non-qualified bucket has a stepped-up basis. So you take 100,000 and you leave it in there for 20 years or so, and now you have $1 million, what have you. I'm just using easy numbers. You pass that on after death, your kids or whoever it goes to, a non-spouse beneficiary gets it at a stepped-up basis, which means they inherit it at $1 million. And if they sell it, they don't have capital gains tax to pay on it. If you sell it in your lifetime, you do. But those are some of the things to think about. Some of those buckets of money are going to be grown for kids, grandkids, those types of things. And that's really what people need to plan for. So
When it's unfortunate, a lot of people don't understand that piece of it until after they've pulled a lot of the money and used it for their own retirement and are finding this out way late in time.
Right.
And it is really unfortunate because the tax is going to continue to increase, at least what we've seen historically.
Right.
And so those numbers will only get higher for our children and whatever comes next.
yeah, I see a ton of that. People that have multiple accounts. So, you have I always kind of simplify it in the three buckets, right? You have a bucket of what we call qualified money, which is your deferred, your IRA, 401k, 403b, 457, those types of things. And then you have your non-qualified bucket, right? And that's money that goes in, it's already been taxed, but whatever growth you get on that, you have to pay taxes and capital gains. But that's one of the ones that's the stepped up basis. And then you have the third bucket, which is the Roth bucket, which it goes in taxed. It's already been taxed and it grows tax free for the rest of your life. So people look at it and they go, okay, I want my money in the Roth. And I'm like, of course you do. But there's strict guidelines on how to get the money in, whether you contribute it or you convert it or what have you. But that's what people, when I put the buckets up, they're like, oh, wow, I never thought about that. But my point being is that, especially in retirement, you kind of have to retrain your mind because so many people will say, look, I got a couple $100,000 in this non-qualified. I don't have a huge tax liability. I need $30,000. Let's take it out of that. I'm going to not pay any tax today, but yet now I got this bucket over here that's the qualified that just keeps growing and keeps growing and keeps growing. And then I hit 73 or older, and then I start taking RMDs, and I don't want RMDs.
Nope.
I had a guy one time that was 100% in the qualified bucket. He was a high earner, high-end exec. His first year, and this is a number of years back, his first year for RMDs was going to be $250,000. And I said, you probably need to think of it if you're going to retire. We have a few years here that we can be efficient and try to get some of this money from this bucket into the Roth bucket. And I said, if not, you're going to get killed in RMDs because you don't need the money. You have income streams, but they're all taxable. So you're going to be paying high taxes on this. And he looked at me and says, I'm not taking that money out. I said, okay. But you will, because if you don't, you're going to get penalized 50%.
Yeah.
And you're still going to have to pay tax on that. So that didn't set real well with him. But it's a good problem to have because the gentleman had a lot of money, but no one had sat down and said, hey, here's what's coming. Whether you like it or not, they're going to get their piece.
Yeah. No, and I think that's really great. It's something that people don't look at, whether it's for personal, but even business, which like selling a business, what is that actually going to have as a taxable income, or to my retirement? Sometimes that's upwards of close to 50%. Having those plans way before you're doing it is so crucial. Is there anything that you're like never ever touch? Do you see anything that you're like, this is terrible advice, or this is such a fraud scam? Like, is there anything crazy you see on your side of things that like do not jump into, run?
Yes and no. I don't want to take shots at a certain industry, but I guess the way I would answer that would be, diversify. It's not a bad thing. If you talk to an insurance agent, they're going to show you that you can get all your ills taken care of with an annuity potentially, or a life insurance policy, a universal life policy. That'll answer all your questions. And an investment advisor will say, hey, no, throw it all in the market. What could go wrong? Those types of things. You want to be able to diversify, and sometimes annuities make sense. For example, if you have a pension, if you're one of the few that still has that pension. Great thing about pension, it's going to pay you for the rest of your life, right? The downside is if you die prematurely, that pension goes away. And I've seen instances that where, I know an individual that worked for 30 plus years, retired with a pension. You would have thought they would have lived another 30 plus years, right? Passed away prematurely within 2 years after taking the pension. Luckily, they signed up for a joint, so the spouse took over, but the spouse was not healthy. You would always thought that would have been the first to go. Passed on to the spouse. The spouse was gone within a year, so they probably left, $750,000 on the table. So that might make sense to take the pension and roll it over into an annuity where you own it. Let it sit for a few years and then start taking money off of it like a pension. But then if something happens prematurely, it passes on to the kids
person.
or the next person down. Yeah.
So how do you even
don't
do
lose
that?
it.
That's a little bit out of what my knowledge is, but how do you do that? How do you roll over that pension into an annuity? Does that have to be done before you start taking the pension? Can it be done post
Right.
taking the pension?
So if you have a pension and you start taking income on it, you're set. You're
Okay.
done. So it's owned by the company or the federal government, city governments, those police officers, firemen, those types of things. A lot of people, if you work for the government, still have pensions, which is wonderful. But once you decide to take it, then that's the decision. You can't go back. So, I've seen people that are married. I know another situation where a gentleman has a pension, and we talked to him about it. He's 12 years older than his wife, and he decided, you know what, I'm going to take a single life because I'm going to get more. Well, if he passes away prematurely, or he's going to predecease his wife, who's 12 years younger, more than likely, that goes away with him.
Yeah.
Not a smart thing, in of course, our opinion, but
From a truly financial effective point,
yeah.
it's not
No,
efficient.
let's hope he lives to 110, and that's all good. But that's an exposure point that you might not have to have in retirement. So I think everybody's heard about those people that pass away, and you're like, no way, that shouldn't happen. But you need to, back to our point we talked about earlier, you need to understand all your options with this. What do I do if I take it this way? What do I do if I roll it over? You roll it from a pension into an IRA. Basically, it's qualified funds. So let's say you have $1 million lump sum, and they're going to pay you $7,000 a year for the rest of your life, you and your spouse, right? Something to think about is if you have kids, those types of things. If you and your wife pass prematurely, and there's still money left in the pension, it goes back to the government or whoever the pension came from. If you put it into an annuity, wait a couple of years, let it grow, and then start taking it, then it pays you just like the pension, but then you own it, and it will pay you for the rest of your life, the rest of your wife or your husband's life. And if there's any money left in it, when you do both pass, then it goes down to your beneficiaries. So it's things to think about.
So why a couple of years after you put it in the annuity before you can pull it like a pension?
Well, if you leave it in there for a few years, it will actually grow. So when you can also put it in and start taking it out right away. But for example, let's look at it this way.
Back up to that limit.
Yeah. So for example, and we have clients that have done this, a number of them. We had an individual that retired with well over $1 million in his 401k. He also had a pension that he and his wife were going to turn on that's going to pay him about $8,000 or $9,000 a month, right? And we kind of looked at that, and I said, man, this is wonderful. I mean, it's all worked. If you take the pension, that's great. Here's something to think about, though. If something happens with you and your wife prematurely, all of that pension money goes away.
Yeah.
Because it's just there for you and your wife. However, if you look at this and take the $1 million, you roll it into an IRA, and then we take the $1 million and roll it into an annuity, let it grow for 3 or 4 years. It's going to pay you at least what you're getting through the pension, if not a little bit more, and then you own it.
Yeah.
And spend the next 3 or 4 years living off your IRA, because you have $1 million there. Let's move it down, right? Let's start using it, because you're going to get killed with taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, most people do hit their highest tax rate in retirement.
Yeah, they don't understand, because you're spending money. What do you want to do? You want to travel? You want to spend?
Yeah, when you also
money.
can't mitigate it the same as if
Right.
you own a business and have all of that, or have different avenues too. So
Right, exactly. So interesting enough, we've done that with this individual, and the market's been so good, it's pretty much refilled in all of his money back. So he's, his IRA is not coming down much, and we're getting ready to turn on that annuity here in a year or so. So he's got the best of both worlds there, and he said, you know what, I get that. So now we'll be working on, okay, now you got all this IRA money that you don't need because you have this pension kicking in. Maybe we can try to be as efficient as possible with it before, you do pass. Or we'll be leaving a lot of qualified funds to their kids. So anyway, those are things that, we look into and educate the clients on to make the best decision for them.
yeah, which everyone listening, really, you should have a team of people, whether that is your CPA, wealth advisor. You should have all of these people taking a look at this and letting you know what this makes sense. So your money is working for you, not against you.
Right.
Steve, before we log off, is there any piece of advice that you would give, whether it's to an individual working for a corporation or a business owner partnership? What would you give signing off today?
Just get things started.
We study and try perfection and then never execute.
Right. It's interesting. My son says it very well. He said, making no decision is making a decision. And people just don't make decisions because they don't know what to do. They don't want to be that, oh my gosh, did you hear about so-and-so? But again, find someone, especially as you get into your retirement or close to those retirement days, because they're so important that you make the right decision. Find someone that you have that synergy with and ask a lot of questions. What would you do? What do you see here? Those types of things. We have a program that we call our blue chip analyzer, our blueprint analyzer, that we put all your financial information into, and it's a program. It's basically your financial life, and we can show with different scenarios. If you need $10,000 a month coming from your portfolio or your IRA account, here's where it's coming. Here's how it's being taxed. Here's how it's drawing down. All of those things you should be looking at. There's so many different variables. I can't even touch base on all of them, but get involved. Start an account, especially if you're a business owner, because you're going to be responsible for your own financial future as far as retirement. If you have kids, get them Roth accounts. If they're babysitting, they have any income coming in, just get it started, because what's that going to look like in 45 years? I mean, those types of things. So better to be in, get things started, and then find someone that you have, a relationship with or have that synergy so that you can at least have the right information going forward.
Yeah. And I think that's key, the right information to make the correct decisions. I see people's success all the time. So next week we'll be back here and we're going to go into more of the business acquisition sense, going through what a stock versus asset sale is, more than just EBITDA, and knowing where you're at. So subscribe below, and thank you so much, Steve.
All right. Thanks, Aubree. Appreciate it.